my motto, nothing's ever holding back.
Welcome back to the Lone Road iRacing podcast. I'm your host, Guy Robertson, and today we're turning the clock back, not by a few years, but by several decades, to a time when racing was raw, mechanical, dangerous, and pure. You know, we spend so much time on iRacing chasing the newest car, the latest GT3 update, the most advanced hybrid. And don't get me wrong, that's all incredible. But sometimes it's easy to forget where all of this came from. Once upon a time, racing wasn't about downforce numbers or wind tunnel optimization. It was about bravery. About reading the car through your fingertips, feeling every bump, every vibration, every shudder through the steering wheel. There were no data engineers telling you your throttle tracers, no traction control, no paddle shifters, just a man, a machine, and a track that could kill you if you got it wrong. That's the era we're exploring today, the golden age of motorsport, and how iRacing could bring it roaring back to life. Because as much as I love modern racing, and I really do, there's something uniquely magical about vintage cars. They make you work for every lap. They reward precision but punish arrogance. And when you nail it, when you balance that perfect drift around a corner with nothing but mechanical grip and courage, it's one of the purest joys in sim racing. So in today's episode, we're asking a big question. If iRacing decided to create a vintage racing category, what cars should be part of it? And not just as novelty items, but as proper, fully developed vehicles that could anchor weekly series, special events, and even endurance leagues. We'll explore the top 10 vintage cars that iRacing may need to add. We'll look at why each one deserves a spot, their specs, their history, and how they'd fit into iRacing's competitive ecosystem. But before we jump into that list, I want to take you behind the scenes to look at what it would actually take to bring these classic machines to life inside iRacing. Let's say you're not me, Guy Robertson, the podcast host anymore. You're Guy Robertson, Senior Development Engineer at iRacing. You've just been called into a meeting with the exec team and they're giving you a massive project. Quote, we want to create a new vintage racing section, something that pays tribute to motorsport history, engages long-time sim racers and brings new life to classic racing content. Start planning for this exciting project. Well, that's an exciting challenge, right? But where do you even begin? First, you've got to think about data. Modern race cars, easy. You contact the manufacturer, they hand you digital CAD models, engine maps, telemetry. Everything's clean and accessible. But vintage cars, it's an entirely different story. These cars live in museums, private collections, or sometimes forgotten barns. The original blueprints may be missing, and even if you find one, half of it's handwritten in pencil. So your first task is data acquisition. That means finding a car that still exists, negotiating access and performing a full laser scan. Every millimetre of its body, chassis and suspension. You also need sound recordings from the real engine, which often involves coaxing a collector to fire it up for you. Next, you have to decide how historically accurate you want to be. Vintage cars weren't all the same. Even within the same model year, teams made small changes, suspension tweaks, carburetor setups, and even fuel mixtures. So, do you model the factory spec or do you model the version that won the championship? And then there's the big one, physics modelling. Old tyres are nothing like modern rubber. Their grip levels, heat behaviour, and load responses are wildly different. Tyre data from the 1960s barely exists. So you'll have to rely on reverse engineering, studying period correct tests, vintage footage, and modern recreations to get it even close. Then comes the engine and transmission behaviour. These engines didn't just rev, they barked. You've got carburetor lag, fuel vapour lock, and manual choke settings. Some of the listeners and viewers might not even know what a choke is. You've got gearbox crunching and clutch slip. You can't just copy and paste modern physics into these. Every car has a unique soul. Another thing to consider is driver safety. Modern iRacing cars are loaded with safety gear, seatbelts, fire suppression systems, modern harnesses, but in a 1950s Jaguar D-Type, you've had a leather helmet and hope. From a realism standpoint, that's authentic, but from a user experience standpoint, you want players to feel immersed, not terrified, so you need to balance authenticity with accessibility. And finally, there's the series design. You can't just throw these cars into random lobbies. They need properly curated events. 1960s Grand Prix recreations, classic endurance races, or vintage touring championships. iRacing's scheduler team would need to match cars with historically accurate tracks, Monza's old banking, Goodwood, Sebring in its classic configuration, and maybe even a few fantasy historic editions of modern circuits. This is what it makes this project so fascinating. It's not just content development, it's a digital archaeology. You're not building a car, you're resurrecting an era. And now that we know what goes into creating a vintage racing experience, let's dive into the dream garage, the top 10 vintage cars iRacing needs to add. Now, before we start talking about the cars, there's going to be some images on the YouTube version of the podcast. So find your way over to the YouTube channel where the podcast lives to be able to see some of the pictures of these famous cars. Our first car then is the Lotus 25 1962 Formula One car. The Lotus 25 is where modern Formula One truly began. Designed by Colin Chapman, it was the first monocoque chassis F1 car, lighter, stronger and miles ahead of its rivals. Top speed of 170 miles per hour or 273 kilometers per hour. The engine, it was a 1.5 Coventry Climax V8, had about 205 horsepower and weighed just over 450 kilograms. What makes this car so appealing for iRacing isn't just its innovation, but how pure it is to drive. There's no wings, no aerodynamic aids, just mechanical grip, driver bravery and throttle discipline. In iRacing, it'd create some of the most visceral open-wheel racing possible. Imagine side by side through Spa's old Eau Rouge or drifting through Goodwood's Levant Corner. This car would be a dream addition for anyone who loves skill-based driving. It rewards smoothness and punishes excess aggression. And with cars like the Lotus 49 already known in sim circles, it had fit perfectly as a historical progression step into a classic F1 series. Now, our second car is the Ford GT40 Mark I from around 1966. If you've ever seen Ford vs Ferrari, you already know why this car belongs on iRacing. Built out of spite and brilliance, the GT40 went to Le Mans to beat Ferrari, and did it spectacularly. It hosts a top speed of 210 miles per hour or 330 km/h. It has a 4.7 litre Ford V8 engine and powers around 485 horsepower, and it has a 5-speed manual transmission. In iRacing, this car would open up vintage endurance racing, something many sim racers have been craving. The GT40 would shine at circuits like Daytona Road, Sebring and of course Le Mans. It's a brute. It understeers, it roars and it demands patience. You can't rush it, but once you tame it, the satisfaction is unreal. Endurance leagues could easily build entire seasons around a GT40 versus Ferrari 330 P4 rivalry, and that'd be quite exciting and different on iRacing. Now we're moving to the Porsche 917K, roughly from the 1970s. This is the monster, the car that terrified drivers and cemented Porsche's legacy. It's the definition of vintage danger, incredibly fast but frighteningly unstable at the limit. It gives the driver top speed of 240 miles per hour or 386 kilometers an hour. The engine is a 4.9 flat 12, giving 630 horsepower, and it only weighs 800 kg. In iRacing, the 917 would sit at the top of the vintage endurance ladder. Just imagine iRacers blasting down the Mulsanne straight, flat out, with only courage and reflexes keeping them alive. The sound alone, that high-pitched 12-cylinder scream, would make this an instant favourite. Combine it with vintage Le Mans layouts and it to become a sim racing event everybody would talk about. We're going to come back in a second and we're going to talk next about the Ferrari 250 GTO from the 1962 era. The Ferrari 250 GTO from the 1960s is not just a car, it's art. It's the Mona Lisa of motorsport. Elegant, perfectly proportioned and ferociously quick for its time. With a top speed of 174 miles per hour or 250 km/h. The engine is a 3-litre V12, kicking out around 300 horsepower. It dominated GT racing in the early 60s. In iRacing, it would bring a level of prestige to vintage GT series unmatched by anything else. However, it's not easy to drive. It's all oversteer, noise and finesse. But when you get it right, it dances for you. And that's the beauty of vintage cars. You don't drive them, you wrestle them. You earn every tenth. Moving on now to our sixth car, the Jaguar D-Type from the 1955 era. If Le Mans had a poster child in the 1950s, this was it. The D-Type is British engineering at its peak. Streamlined, sophisticated and dangerously fast, with a top speed of 172 miles per hour or 277 km/h. With a 3.4 inline V6 engine, it kicks out roughly 250 horsepower. It won Le Mans 3 times and it looks every bit the part. That long tail fin, the low cockpit, the distinctive oval grille. In iRacing, it would bring a pre-GT40 flavour, the birth of endurance racing as we know it. Drivers will need to master throttle control and rhythm, as too much aggression gives you instant death. Imagine a D-Type versus Mercedes 300 SLR event on a recreated 1950s Monza or Sebring circuit. That's historic racing done right. Now, I'm not a vintage car aficionado, but this one is known as the Batmobile. It is the BMW 3-litre CSL from the 1973 era. The Batmobile nickname wasn't just for show. Those huge fenders and wings made it look outrageous. But the CSL was also a championship winning machine, dominating the European Touring Car Championship with a top speed of 138 miles per hour or 222 kilometers an hour. The engine was a 3.2 inline V6 kicking out 340 HP. In iRacing, this will be the cornerstone of a 1970s touring car series. It's tail-happy, noisy and demands rhythm, the kind of car that rewards consistency over aggression. At circuits like Nürburgring, Zandvoort and Silverstone Classic, it'd be pure theatre. The best part, it bridges eras. New iRacers could learn car control before stepping up to a modern GT racer. Something you may not have thought would land itself in our list today is the Mazda RX-3 from 1973. It's light, simple and powered by Mazda's signature rotary engine, the RX-3. It's a legend in grassroots racing. With a little top speed of 115 miles per hour, 185 km/h, it hosted a 1.1 twin rotor engine and kicked out 110 HP. This is the kind of car iRacing needs to attract casual racers who still love vintage driving. It's small, cheap and forgiving, perfect for short, fun races around Oran Park, Okayama or Lime Rock. Add a few body kits and liveries and you could easily see it form in the heart of an historic Japanese Touring Car Cup series. Now we're going to be back in a second and we're going to talk about the last few cars that made today's vintage car list, folks. The McLaren M8D Can-Am from 1970s, and that's a mouthful, folks, let me tell you. This one's another monster. The M8D was part of the No Rules All Power Can-Am series, where teams could build basically whatever they wanted. With a top speed of 220 miles per hour or 354 km/h, it hosted a 7.6 Chevrolet V8, kicking out a whopping 680 HP. Unbelievably, it had no traction control, no aerodynamics beyond raw wings, just horsepower and nerve, and probably an adult nappy. For iRacing, this car would be a spectacle. Massive power slides, brute force cornering and thunderous sound. Perfect for tracks like Road America or Motorsport. The Can-Am era was wild and iRacing could finally let modern drivers experience just how brave those 1970s racers really were. Okay, 2 to go. What about the Ford Escort RS 1600 from the 1970s? Now, this is a driver's car. It's lightweight, nimble and capable on tarmac or gravel. Given a top speed of 120 miles an hour or 193 km/h, the 1.6 Cosworth BDA engine kicked out 120 HP. It's the perfect link between road racing and rallying, and it will give iRacing's rallycross community a vintage injection of fun. Plus, it's beloved worldwide, from Britain to New Zealand to Japan. It's not fast, but it's lively. Every corner, every throttle blip tells you a story. The Escort RS would be ideal for a shorter, aggressive races and historic club events. A crowd pleaser for sure. And finally, the car on today's hit list is the Lotus 49, or the 1967 F1 car. Basically, this is the king, the Lotus 49, powered by the legendary Ford Cosworth DFV engine, the car that redefined F1. Top speed, a little low I suppose, 185 mph or 298 km/h. It hosted a 3-litre V8 engine, giving the driver 400 HP. It bridged the gap between classic and modern. The first F1 car where the engine was a stress chassis member. In iRacing, it would become the ultimate skill test. The power delivery is brutal, the braking is minimal, and every lap feels like a duel with physics itself. This would anchor iRacing's vintage Formula category, pairing beautifully with classic tracks like Monaco, Silverstone and Spa. So we really would like Monaco to come into iRacing, so that's maybe one for the devs to take away. It's dangerous, this car, it's difficult, but it's a beaut. Now, we're going to zoom back out. Why should iRacing even bother with vintage cars? Because they teach something that no modern car can: connection. When you drive a vintage car, you're not managing systems, you're communicating. You listen to the gearbox, you feel the tyres, you predict the car's next move. In modern sims, mistakes can be absorbed by the technology we use today. In a 1960s race car, one mistake ends your race, or even worse, your life. Vintage cars also encourage community racing. They level the field. Nobody's hunting for the perfect BOP or latest setups to exploit it. Everyone's wrestling with the same beast. They also add variety in iRacing's library. Imagine logging on and seeing weekly events for maybe historic Formula 1, classic endurance, vintage touring cup or retro rallycross challenge. That kind of structure brings in history buffs, older sim racers and people who simply love cars with personality. From a marketing perspective, it's pure gold, because these cars aren't just content, they're stories. Every one of them has a legacy that sim racers can relive. And for those who never touched a vintage car before, it's humbling. It forces you to relearn throttle control, corner entry and racecraft from scratch. That makes you a better modern racer too. Vintage cars don't just add nostalgia, they had depth. So there you have it, viewers and listeners. The top 10 vintage cars iRacing could add next, and the engineering challenge that comes with resurrecting them. From the elegant Ferrari 250 GTO to the terrifying McLaren M8D, these cars represent the roots of racing, where every lap was a battle between bravery and control. And maybe, just maybe, if iRacing ever launches a dedicated vintage section, we'll get to live those moments ourselves, feeling what Fangio, Clark and McQueen once felt when they gripped the wheel. Let me know what other cars you would be in your dream edition. Would you choose something graceful like the D-Type, or would you throw yourself into the madness of the 917K? I'm still looking for new co-hosts. Obviously, we met Brendan a couple of weeks ago, and he'll be back on the podcast hopefully sometime in the future. But there's other spaces for other like-minded individuals who want to come and join me on this show. We're also looking for sponsors for the podcast as well. I'm Guy Robertson, and this has been another episode of the Lone Road iRacing podcast, reminding you to keep your revs high, your braking smooth, and your passion for iRacing alive, no matter what decade it comes from. Take care, look after yourselves, and I'll see you on the track soon. Happy iRacing.
Whatever it takes, we're racing, we're in the zone. Whatever it takes, we push hard, never alone. I'm in the cockpit, the engines roar, hear me now. We're racing circles, got a hustle, made a vow. Chasing victory, it's all or nothing on the track. Sweet is my motto, nothing's ever holding back. Whatever it takes.